with me live in the studio. Hello, Kevin.
Hello there, Peter. How are you?
I'm very well, thanks. Lively Prime Minister's questions as well. I think Kemi Badenoch seems to be sort of slightly finding her stride, maybe a little bit earlier on today, a couple of hours ago we had PMQs.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, she seemed a lot more relaxed than understandable. I think the first couple of weeks actually, she seemed very nervous, as you would be. I mean, it's an absolute bear pit.
Thing.
It's a bear pit and a lot of pressure on her. But yeah, she's growing into it. I thought she was. The topics she went on today, obviously Labour are giving her plenty of ammunition right now with Louise Haigh, for instance, resigning.
We'll talk about that in a second.
She walked into it a little bit by talking about convictions, and then it gave Keir Starmer a bit of an open goal on Rishi Sunak and Boris Johnson, obviously having been fined over COVID. But that aside, I thought she actually performed pretty well.
We'll talk about the Louise Haigh bit in a second, but first of all, there was an interesting line which a few people picked up, I'm sure you picked it up as well, about growth. So Labour, essentially, this seems a bit boring, but believe me, it's important. Labour bet the farm on growth. They said we need 2.5% growth for all our plans to happen. Now, we know from the Office of Budget Responsibility that is just not going to happen. They've told us that's not going to happen with the budget that's there at the minute. Maybe things will change over the next 4 years. I hope they do. I hope things get better for everybody in the UK. But the point is that with that growth, they had said we want to be the biggest, the fastest growing nation in the G7. But actually, the language changed slightly today, didn't it, Kevin?
Yeah, well, exactly, because I think they realise that they're not going to achieve it. I mean, you're looking at, the G7 includes America, obviously, and America is going gangbusters right now. I mean, and that's before Donald Trump comes in, and you've got to imagine he will throw the kitchen sink at boosting growth even further. So yeah, the language has changed. It's no longer talking about being the highest in the G7. They're tempering expectations effectively. And it's not just a case of, oh, that's a promise not being kept. As you say, they bet the farm on it because they need the money that comes from economic growth. They need those the taxes to go up, the tax take coming into the Treasury to go up, because that's then going to fund all the things that they want to do, or else Rachel Reeves is going to have to come back for more borrowing and more taxes, which is what she said she will not do.
Let's take a little, I'll actually feel to mention that a number of times, so we'll come back to that in a second. I just want to play a couple of clips now from Prime Minister's questions, and they are specifically about Louise Haigh, the former Transport Secretary. This is what, we've got two clips here, and the first one is a question asked by Kemi Badenoch to Keir Starmer.
He owes the House an explanation. He said that the former Transport Secretary was only asked to resign after further information came to light. What is that? What was that further information?
Exactly. I'm not going to disclose private conversations. Further information came to light. The Justice Secretary resigned. As I say, what a marked contrast. Whilst she's obsessing with the Westminster issues, we're getting on with fixing the mess, fixing the foundations, that £22 billion black hole.
Further information came to light, but he's not going to tell us what it is. I mean, this is about the appointment of someone who is a Secretary of State. Yeah. This is quite a big deal, Kevin.
It is, and I think he has got questions to answer there, because we now know that he knew back in 2020 rather, when Louise Haigh was made Shadow Northern Ireland Secretary, she fronted up and told him, look, I've got this in my past, but he let her become the Shadow Northern Ireland Secretary, and later on made her Shadow Transport Secretary,
bigger role,
and then put her into the Cabinet. So he can't plead ignorance, he can't say he did not know. Now, what we don't know is what is this other information that came to light, if indeed there is other information that came to light. I mean, I think they've done a successful job in killing the story, I think, by getting rid of her. I mean, you imagine if she had tried to cling on, we'd have had days and days of drip, drip, more revelations, more questions, them probably struggling to answer those questions, and she would have had to had gone eventually anyway. So it was brutal, but I think they had to get her when they did. However, there are still questions left unanswered.
And indeed, including those asked by Kemi Badenoch in this clip. This is a little bit later on in Prime Minister's questions.
The truth is, he appointed a person convicted of fraud to the Cabinet. The first thing she did was bung hundreds of millions of pounds in pay rises to her trade union friends. Wasn't this a fraud on the British people? The country needs conviction politicians, not politicians with convictions.
Mr. Speaker, I gently remind her that two of her predecessors had convictions for breaking the COVID rules.
I mean, that's quite a good line, but it's also not factually true, because you don't actually have a conviction if you get a fixed penalty notice.
Yeah, I think, you're right, but those details are sort of lost in the political
although he is the former
forth.
Director of Public Prosecution, so
you might think he would know what a conviction
maybe he would
is.
know what a conviction is. But anyway, we have the current Director of Public Prosecution not knowing what a non-crime hate incident is, saying he had to Google it. So,
well,
you just never know, really, do you?
I mean, yeah, he obviously had that one tucked away in his back pocket just in case. She mentioned Louise Haigh, so he deployed it successfully. And you're right, while it might not be technically accurate, I think in the forum of PMQs, it's quite an effective retort. But, I think that was evidence, though, again, as I was saying earlier, of Kemi Badenoch being a little bit more confident. It was a pre-prepared line, obviously, but she said it well, and she just seemed more at ease with herself. Whereas in the previous weeks, I think she seemed a little bit nervous, a little bit edgy, and that is picked up by the MPs behind her. That's people forget that about PMQs. It's almost as important about what the people behind you think as what the people out there in the country think, especially right now when she's still trying to find her feet.
We've got a voice note from Ian on PMQs, presumably not Ian Collins, although that would be quite intriguing if Ian had sent a voice note to his own programme. But nonetheless, I'm in for Ian Collins today. Another Ian, I presume. This is what he has to say about Prime Minister's questions today.
I just listened to PMQs, and it just seems like whichever Prime Minister is in power, particularly this one, he's even worse than Sunak and before him, but they never answer any of the questions. They just spout out the same old black hole nonsense and foundations and all that kind of stuff. Is there no way that they can be made to answer the questions so that the general public deserve answers to these questions rather than just listen to the same old sound bites time after time after time?
It's a very fair point from Ian, isn't it? And I think a lot of us political journalists get pretty frustrated by it as well, Kevin, because you do hear, you can almost play sort of bingo with those kind of, 22 billion black hole, X on your bingo card. And actually, there is a point about this, isn't there, when you say, why can't Prime Minister's questions, why can't there be answers here? Do you think there ever will be, or is this just the nature of politics in this country?
I mean, I think it's just the nature of politics, unfortunately. In those circumstances, it's all about, especially nowadays with social media, 24-hour news, it's all about getting those clips. So they go in there with a pre-prepared lines. As soon as they get an opportunity, they deploy that line, and their social media team
I haven't checked Labour's social media, but I would be astonished if that line about the leaders with convictions isn't put out on their social media, because that was a pre-prepared line, obviously.
Absolutely. Yeah. So, and it's almost regardless of the question they're asked, they're going to say it. They have a script and they're going to get to the end of it, come what may, and they want to just hit that mark, and ideally it'll be the top of the 6 o'clock news, something like that, but failing that, it'll definitely be all over Facebook, it'll all be over Twitter, X, Blue Sky, whatever. But unfortunately, you think, well, like Ian was saying there, if you are an ordinary member of the public actually watching PMQs, hoping for a bit of illumination, a bit of information, a bit of the question being answered, then you're probably going to be let down.
You're probably going to be let down. Graham in Bushy says, as Starmer is not transparent on the additional information that came to light, Louise Haigh, it will dog him until at least he gives a good explanation. Is it Haigh or Haigh?
I've always said Haigh.
Everyone says Haigh apart from me, but I just wonder where the G bit is. I suppose H-A-I-G-H. Anyway.
You can see why it would be pronounced without the hard
G. I suppose you're right. For foreign criminals, says David, why not offer them half off their prison sentence if they voluntarily agree to return to the country of origin on completion of a reduced sentence and not return to the UK? Terry and Clacton-on-Sea has been in touch as well, constituent of Nigel Farage's. Great show to ease the prison overcrowding. Why don't the prison service do what they used to do? Form the prisoners up into working parties, send them out to fix potholes. Prisoners get off their backsides, get plenty of fresh air, learn some new skills and burn off their anger. We get semi-decent roads. Voila, problem solved. Lots of people asking about this issue. Fewer criminals sent to prison to combat the 12,000 cell shortfall. This is a really, really big issue. National Audit Office report, they're the ones who mark the government's homework, published today, saying there will be a shortage of 12,400 prison places by the end of 2027. And actually, we've seen in the latest budget, the Ministry of Justice's budget has been reduced, Kevin. I mean, how on earth are they going to get through this one?
I've absolutely no idea. I mean, and the political heat that they took for letting out all those prisoners, thousands of prisoners, soon after the general election. Now, they tried to blame, I think probably rightly actually, given the election had only just happened, blame the previous government. But, if we're in the same position a year, 18 months further down the line, then they can't really blame the Conservatives for that. It's on their watch. And I think there's a lot of pressure now on the Prisons Minister, James Timpson, to come up with radical. I think he's going to, and he seems to be a radical guy.
He has been pretty radical in the past as well.
He has been in terms of trying to cut the prison population. But again, politically, it's quite tricky because, as we know, voters quite like criminals being banged up.
Yes.
So if you're then going to turn around and say, well, actually, in order to solve the prison crisis, we're going to, people that might otherwise have previously gone to prison, they're not going to go to prison this time, then the Tories will turn around and say you're soft on crime, and that is potentially very problematic for...
It certainly is, because it matters what politicians say. We've been talking about that in regard to Prime Minister's questions as well. And Rachel Reeves, interesting one here about tax rises, because she ruled them out a week ago, but now she's sort of ruling them in again. Just take us through this, Kevin.
Yeah, so at the CBI conference last week, it was really...
so they're the big business leaders, Confederation of British Industry
They have an annual conference, and the Chancellor was there, and she did a Q&A with the CBI president. And in this Q&A, so it's not scripted, she basically said she would not have to increase taxes or increase borrowing again before the next general election. Now, trying to get her to repeat that, trying to get Keir Starmer to support that... As
they did in Prime Minister's questions last week, and he didn't repeat it there.
Exactly. Yeah. Has proven to be very difficult indeed. And again, yesterday she was up in Yorkshire, and she was involved in another Q&A, a fireside chat, as it was described, and again she was pressed on it, you know, can you repeat that pledge? And, you know, she was using weasel words. She was saying that she can't write 5 years worth of budgets.
Yeah, she'd said
now.
Basically that a week previously.
That's effectively what she had done. So it does look as though she had misspoken, which when you're Chancellor of the Exchequer talking about, you know, fiscal policy...
Well, it matters.
It matters.
What you say matters.
It literally moves markets.
Yes.
So, and if...
So she had said previously, about a week ago, I'm really clear, I'm not coming back with more borrowing or more taxes, she told the Confederation of British Industry. But number 10, now they've distanced themselves from those remarks. She hasn't repeated the line. Keir Starmer didn't back her up last week. I mean, she's in hot water here.
She is in hot water because, you know, you listen to the Institute for Fiscal Studies and they will say there's no way she's not going to have to come back with some sort of tax increases or increased borrowing unless, you know, they defy all expectations and economic growth goes through the roof.
Including the expectations of the number crunchers, their own number crunchers, plus the independent number crunchers of the Office of Budgetary Responsibility as well. Yeah.
No one expects that to happen. So, and they've also said as well, boxing themselves in, no return to austerity. Yeah. So, if you can't cut and you can't borrow and you can't raise taxes, well, what on earth are you going to do? But you can absolutely bet your bottom dollar if, not maybe the next budget, but the one after or the one after that, taxes do go up or borrowing does go up, then the Tories will happily replay that promise that Rachel Reeves appeared to make to the CBI last week.
Yeah, well, we will keep an eye on that.